Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Paul Colbert. I'm here on behalf of the El Paso Independent School District. Mr. Chairman, as you see on the form there, I signed up in opposition to the bill, but I can't speak for the other people who have done so, but I think it's not that we're not asking you to pass a bill. I think we're asking you to make changes so that we can be then in support of the bill that you do pass. And that the changes we're asking you to make do not have to do with whether or not you're going to not have that $3.5 billion that you want to put into the program. Let me speak about a couple, since there's very limited time here, let me speak about a couple of specific things that are problems with the bill as you have it right now. One of the biggest problems is you have an appendix in there. You know, it's something that may have served a purpose at some time, but it doesn't serve a purpose any longer. And that's the proration language that's left over from Representative Eisler's proration proposal before. He took some of the language that Senator Shapiro had that was good language in terms of changing the way we have the current proration statute in 42253H, and he changed it to say that you aren't going to pay the money back if you prorate money out. And the reason was because he was using that as the mechanism of removing $4 billion from the system. You're not using that as the mechanism any longer, but that language not only stays in there, it got emphasized in the redraft of the bill here to where not only does it delete the requirement you pay it back, it adds specific language saying you won't pay it back. That's exactly what we did. That was the mistake I made when I put that proration provision in the language many years ago. Okay? And up until when I first started doing school finance, the foundation school program was an estimated item in the budget. It literally, the amount was estimated and it was just automatically funded. When we got into the cash flow problems and so on in the mid to late 1980s, we had discussions with the controller about whether or not the budget was certifiable and with the treasurer about whether or not the cash flow of the state would be able to match things up. And we put the proration requirement in at that time. What happened then was a horrible problem for school districts. School districts would get down 9 months into the school year at the end of the second year of the biennium, and all of a sudden they were told, that money you've already budgeted and spent, we're not going to give it to you. And we did that, I think, twice. And the outcry was horrible. It was humongous. We learned from that mistake, we fixed it, and we put in the requirement that you would pay the money back the following September if, in fact, proration was needed. You're now deleting that and going back to the mistake I made, but you're making my mistake all over again, and I would encourage you not to do it. Let me give you an example of how that can work in the current circumstance. You all have been looking at printouts based on a $4 billion shortfall. Okay? You've got $800 million in Senate Bill 2 that you're pulling out of the foundation school program because you're revising the property value estimates and the water counts. And then you've got a $2.3 billion amount assigned to the August deferral, and every estimate that I've seen on the August deferral at the level of funding that you're at is it's going to be more like about $2 billion. So you've got $300 million you're pulling out of the program there. You could have maybe another $500 million, maybe even $800 million, $700 million that you're pulling out of the program by making artificial changes to the property values. Let's say it's $700 million and the $300 million. All of a sudden, you are now underfunding the foundation school program by $5 billion, not by $4 billion, and you have now put a provision in that says you don't pay it back to school district. So every printout that you've seen is wrong. Every printout that you've seen is wrong, and the methodology of distributing that extra $1 billion in cuts would be the methodology that's within this bill. The methodology within this bill is flawed because a uniform percentage applied to your state aid. Well, that just hits the poorest districts the worst. Your original language, Senator Shapiro, had it to state and local total revenue. There's even a problem with doing it to state and local total revenue, because let's say that my district is at $5,500 per student in total revenue, and we're at a dollar tax rate, and Senator Patrick, your district is at the same $5,500, and they're at $1.17. Okay, you've made the extra effort. We're taking the extra money from your extra effort, if you will, versus my district that was getting that money without having made that extra effort. If you want to have a uniform way of doing it, the way to do it would be to apply a uniform percentage to the state and local tax revenue per WADA per penny of tax effort, the yield per penny that each district gets, and then you don't penalize the districts who have made the highest tax effort. But you've got to make changes to that proration section, or I guarantee you, in about another year and a half, your school districts are going to be saying, you folks lied to me. You said this is what we were going to be getting. And they'll say that to you anyway. I understand, Senator Ogden. I've been there before, too. But they will have a very good reason to say it, because whatever you told them they were going to be getting, you'll be cutting an additional $500 million, $1 billion out of them. And that will happen again and again and again and again in the future. That's problem number one. I've got other things, but I've more than run out of time. Be glad to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for your testimony, and I wouldn't guarantee him that. I don't think we've made particularly bad assumptions in this bill. In fact, I think they've been pretty conservative. So we'll see, and the legislature will have an opportunity to meet long before proration has to be enacted. So I think we're all right. I think we'll be all right.
I'm just telling you what my experience was, Senator, and I guarantee you it was not a pleasant one, and that's why we made the change in the law, and I'm just suggesting you don't want to make my mistake all over again.
I understand that exactly, but we weren't here to promise what we don't have either. That's not why we were sent here. Okay. Anything else? Senator Lee?
Thank you, sir. Paul, what else in this bill can you point out to? Please, let's make another 2-3 minutes of time. We need to know what else is on your mind.
Okay. I understand, Chairman Ogden, I understand your comment with respect to not being able to touch the rainy day fund. But I will tell you, as co-author of the rainy day fund, that we created it precisely for the purpose of what you are experiencing right now. And there was a lot of good discussion on the House side that was going on simultaneous with the hearing here that you might find.
In fact, you may have written this in the statute. It says if we come back in next January and we're short, the LVB is supposed to make a recommendation out of the Economic Stabilization Fund to cover the shortage.
They make a recommendation to you, and if you adopt it, then
did you write that?
I don't remember if I put that particular provision in.
Once again, I think the mechanisms are in place to avoid the doomsday scenario that you talked about.
But you have no reason to leave that provision in there that was put in there only because Chairman Eisler didn't want to have a requirement to pay back the $4 billion.
Okay.
Anyway,
I
was trying to answer Senator Lucio's question there. The formulas are designed to pay for the basic cost of an education program. Target revenue is a hold harmless, and it was put in place in part because when we compressed tax rates by 1/3, we didn't raise the yield on the pennies by the inverse of that to maintain formula funding. So part of what target revenue does is it makes up for the fact that we compressed by a whole lot more than we raised up to deal with the fact that you're only getting that yield on 100 pennies rather than 150 pennies. But a lot of what target revenue does besides that is, number one, it freezes in place all the old inequities that were in the system, which were primarily wealth-based, and it freezes in place the inequities in the system that were just arbitrary, that were happenstance. Primarily, those were due to property value changes. When districts, as you know, Senator, when districts set their target revenue, they had a choice of the 2005-06 school year, 2006-07 under the old law, 2006-07 under the new law. They got to cherry pick whatever worked out best for them. The result of that is school districts that had growth in property values, which used to, the way it has always worked up until then was you got that growth in property values one year and then the state factored it in and in essence took the money that you got a temporary loan on away from you that 1 year, has been the gift that keeps on giving. So if you had that growth in property values, we have been paying you for that same 2005-06 or 2006-07 growth in property values. We've been paying you that money over and over and over and over again every year since that time. In addition to that, there are a lot of other things. Let's say, for example, you have a district that entered into an agreement with a Chapter 41 district to buy water on that one occasion. That was a one-year thing. We've been paying them for that payment again and again and again and again, over and over and over again. We have all of these arbitrary things. If you do a scattergram now of the distribution of money, it's an absolute random series of dots all over the place, unrelated to wealth, totally, I mean, it's still related to wealth, but it's scattered all over the line with respect to it, unrelated to tax effort and everything else. It's all of this random stuff. And what we've done within this thing, and even more so under what the House forced you all to do at the beginning of the bill, the first year of this bill, is we basically said, we're going to take that money and we're going to take money away from the people who are on the formula funding that was already too low to begin with and use it to preserve that target revenue money that was arbitrarily being given out.
Right.
And the answer to that is...
I forgot what the question is.
Yeah.
What's the answer?
The question was, what else is wrong with this?
Okay.
Okay.
We got it.
All right. And you can fix that.
Senator Lucy.
Paul, I just want to thank you. I know that you have a world of information, and I'm just fortunate to have served with you back then, and I know exactly what we've been, and I appreciate you keeping up with this particular issue. I think the main I guess problem for me is that we're not using the resources to address this particular issue they're available in this state. But I don't mean to cut you off.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of us appreciate specifically what you're sharing with us here today, and we'll continue to work with you and other advocates who really make sense in what you speak to us about here today.
Thank you, Senator. If folks had adopted your proposal to delay the July payment, then there would not have been the necessity of making cuts from the people at the bottom.
Thank you for that.
Senator Shapiro.
Yes, thank you. Paul, I want to just make clear that what you're talking, there's two different references to payback, and I want to make clear, any settle-up money that we owe is not diminished one nickel in this bill. Settle-up means that you assumed how much money you were going to pay the districts. If for whatever reason it is come out through their property values, and they didn't raise the money, then the settle-up is still there, and that hasn't changed here. What has changed, you're right, what has changed is the $4 billion that we keep talking about that people seem to think we're going to change our mind about. That issue, from my perspective, has always been the one-time stimulus money, which is $3.2 billion that we gave to school districts during the last biennium that we no longer have from the federal government. I just wanted to clarify the dollars that you're referencing. It's not the settle-up money that we don't pay back. Senator,
there's two different things that people commonly refer to as settle up, one of which is technically settle up, the other one is technically not settle up, but people confuse the two together. The settle up that you're talking about is still within the law.
That's correct.
And that's the pluses and minuses for individual school districts.
That's
Your school district overestimated on the number of ADAs, so we're going to take away from it.
We know that. Answer.
But the problem that you're running into is there's the statewide settle up. The statewide settle-up is the provision that basically says if, for whatever reason, the legislature doesn't appropriate enough money to fund the formulas, then that shortfall is paid back in September of the following year.
With all due respect, that's not settle-up. With all due respect, that's proration.
I understand that, and that's what I didn't call it settle-up. I called it proration.
You said there's two kinds of settle-up.
I said there's two things that people confuse with. I said there's two things that people commonly refer to, and that one technically isn't.
That's fine.
And that's the proration one.
That's fine. It's proration. It's not settle-up.
Right.
Settle-up is what we do, and we will continue to do. Proration is the new law.
But with the new law, if that proration is left as it is, there won't be the money to do the settle-up you're talking about, and districts will in fact see that $500 million or $1 billion or whatever less taken out of the money that they get.
But that's not right. The money's in the rainy day fund. It is. It is a backstop for the problem that you're talking about. And when people say we haven't committed the resources, all they're saying is we didn't commit them up front, we're holding them back. That's all. But those resources are there. That rainy day fund is there, and I guarantee you that if we come back in here a year and a half and we're short, we have got the resources available to avoid the kind of problem you're talking about. So in my opinion, it's a hypothetical point you're trying to make, not a practical point.
I experienced
that
hypothetical.
On purpose that way.
I experienced that hypothetical is all I can say, Senator.
All right. Well, yesterday is not today. All right. Anything else?